I was entertained by Gladiator 2, but the big question is, was it as entertaining or even as good as the original? And that's a question I will be answering in this video. Now, as always, if you want to see what I gave this movie out of 10, head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about Gladiator 2. So this movie takes place like 15 to 16 years after the original, and it follows Maximus's son, Lucius, who is played by Paul Mescal, as he looks for revenge and also to restore the glory of Rome to the people. Starting things off with the good, and this is probably the strongest part of the movie, but the performances across the board in this thing were really good. This cast was loaded, and I don't think there was a single weak performance of the group, but there was one performance that was definitely better than all of the other ones, and that belongs to none other than Denzel Washington. Now, this isn't really a surprise because Denzel is great in everything he is in, and in my opinion, he was probably the best part of this movie. You really didn't know which side his character was on until they revealed his true intentions later in the movie, and when he was on screen, you were locked into what he was saying and what he was doing because he is just that captivating in not only this movie, but obviously every movie he has ever done. Then we have Paul Mescal, and I think he did really well. He did a good job at just showing the pure rage and anger that his character had because of what happened to him in the very first scene of this movie, and also from when his mom sent him away from Rome when he was a kid. And then the scene when he finally reunites with his mother for the first time was probably his best scene because you see all of that rage and anger finally spill over. There were lots of parallels between him and Maximus, and there were things I liked about that and also things I didn't really like about that because at times in this movie it kind of felt like they were trying to make him a Maximus 2.0 instead of having him stand alone as his own character. But that really doesn't have anything to do with Paul Mescal's performance because he was great. It was more just the choices that they made with his character, and I'll talk about that a little later in the video. Joseph Quinn played a great villain in my opinion, but again, there were some character choices and things they did with his character that I wasn't necessarily on board with, and this is the same for Pedro Pascal's character as well. But at the end of the day, all the performances were great. There was just a few character choices in there that I wasn't all the way on board with, and I will talk about that again later in the video. Next up for the good, I have the action, and this is actually one thing I think they did better than the original. All of the action in this just felt bigger in scale, and this is really where you got a lot of the entertainment out of this movie is through watching all of these big battle sequences. They got way more creative with the action in the Colosseum, and look, if you put monkeys, rhinos, and sharks in the Colosseum, I don't care how wonky the CGI is, I'm just gonna sit back and be entertained by what I'm watching on screen. There were also some hand-to-hand and sword fights mixed in there as well that I thought were really cool, and the director Ridley Scott is really good at creating these large-scale action sequences, and he does it again in this movie. Although I think this movie could have been better, the action in my opinion is as good as it gets. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is that this movie does rehash a lot of things that happened in the first movie, and in my opinion, it doesn't really do all that much to set itself apart from that original movie. You could make an argument that it is the same story as the original. I mean, a man wants vengeance on someone in Rome because they killed someone that he loves, but then he is captured and turned into a gladiator, and once he returns to Rome in order to get that vengeance, he also realizes he wants to return the glory of Rome to the people. Now, I'm all for paying homage to the original movie, but it just felt like this one was hitting not only the same beats, but also some of the same scenes as the original, just with different characters. I will say this one did have a cool political subplot with Denzel's character, but other than that, this one just felt way too familiar to that first film. Finally, getting into the bad, and the first thing I have here I mentioned a little earlier in the video, but there were some character choices in this movie that I wasn't necessarily on board with. Now, I liked all of the characters in this movie, but I just feel there were a couple of characters that were wasted and had more potential. And those couple of characters are Pedro Pascal and Joseph Quinn's character. Now, Pedro Pascal's character Marcus had a very interesting dynamic that was building throughout this movie with Paul Mescal's character Lucius. They were building up this story of Lucius wanting vengeance on Marcus's character, but then they kind of wrapped this storyline up like halfway through the movie, and that was confusing for me because I just felt like there was so much more to be explored, not only with their relationship, but Pedro Pascal's character Marcus as well. Then they did this same thing with Joseph Quinn's character because something very interesting was happening with him as well throughout this movie, but they wrapped that storyline up very quickly as well. And I just feel like if we got more time to sit with and explore these characters, it would have not only enhanced this movie, but gave this film some more substance, which is something that I thought this was lacking. The last thing I have for the bad, and this is really just a me thing, and that is that even though this movie did rehash a lot of things that happened in the first one, in my opinion, it couldn't quite capture that same feeling that the first movie gave you. Now, that first movie was a classic, and when you were done watching it, it left you with a feeling. And honestly, I don't really know how to explain that feeling, but essentially it's why we still quote this movie to this very day. Like, are you not entertained? Or then we have Maximus's speech where he's like, I'm a father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that this movie doesn't necessarily have anything memorable like the first one does. And I don't think you're going to leave this movie with that feeling of, man, I just watched something amazing. I was 100% entertained by this movie, and I definitely enjoyed my time with it, but it's not a movie that I'm going to be talking about in the years to come like we do with the first Gladiator. Now, with that said, this is still a good, entertaining movie. It's got great performances and huge action sequences that are a lot of fun to watch. And even though I think it falls short of the original, I think it's still a movie that you should check out. Those are my thoughts on Gladiator 2. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.